The wind howled across the frozen plains, carrying sharp ice crystals that cut at exposed skin. Evan pulled his jacket tighter. But the cold still crept into his bones. The crash had left him stranded on this alien world, far from any human settlement. And night here was worse than anything he had felt on Earth. He had managed to find shelter in a half-collapsed wooden cabin, its roof patched with old metal sheets and snow piled against the walls. Inside, the air was still bitter cold, and his small fire barely gave any heat. He sat close to it, rubbing his hands, trying to ignore the hunger in his stomach. Outside, the land was silent except for the wind. No sign of life, no sound of movement, but then, faint at first, he heard it, a crunch in the snow, slow and deliberate. Evan froze, listening, his heart beating faster. The sound came again, closer this time, followed by a low, rumbling growl. He reached for the small knife he had found in the wreckage. Holding it tight, the cabin door creaked open without warning, and a tall figure stepped inside. She was covered in thick, silver-gray fur that shimmered in the dim firelight. Her eyes glowed faint gold, like a predator in the dark. Snow clung to her hair and fur, and her breath came out in visible clouds. She was injured, a dark stain spreading down her arm, but her gaze was sharp and alert. Evan had seen pictures of wolf-like aliens in data files before, but never one this close. Her presence filled the small space instantly. "Do not fear," she said in a low, rough voice, her words accented but clear. "I will not harm you. Human, but the cold will, unless we share heat." Evan's mind struggled to catch up. "Share heat," he repeated, unsure if he heard her right. She nodded once, her golden eyes unblinking. "My kind and yours, warmth is life in this night. Alone we will freeze, together we may live." Every instinct told him to keep his distance, but the icy air bit harder with each passing moment. He could see her shivering despite her fur, could see the faint tremble in her wounded arm. She moved closer to the fire, but shook her head. "This flame is weak. It will not be enough. Come," she said, lowering herself beside the bedroll he had made from ship blankets. He hesitated, still clutching his knife, but the thought of freezing to death made the decision for him. Slowly, he lay beside her, the thick fur of her body pressing against him. The heat was almost immediate, spreading into his chest and arms. For a while, neither of them spoke. The storm outside grew stronger, rattling the cabin walls. He could feel her breathing, slow and steady, her warmth keeping the worst of the cold away. Her scent was strange, a mix of wild forest and something sharp, almost like spice. He found himself listening to her heartbeat. Steady and strong. In the dim light, he saw her watching him with that same glowing gaze. It wasn't threatening, but it wasn't entirely soft either. "You have a name." "Human," she asked quietly. "Evan," he said, his voice low. She inclined her head slightly. "I am Rinka, daughter of Vero's last hunt leader of the Ice Claw Pack." Her tone carried pride, but also something heavier, maybe loss. Evan wondered why she was alone, wounded, in the middle of the frozen plains. But before he could ask, she closed her eyes, her breathing slowing. He realized she was drifting into sleep. Despite the danger, despite her alien nature, he felt a strange sense of safety. He didn't know how long he lay there, the storm's howl slowly fading into the background. His eyelids grew heavy, the warmth making him relax just before sleep took him. He opened his eyes again. Rinka's eyes were open, watching him in the darkness, not with hostility, but with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. Her gaze seemed to study him deeply, as if weighing something important. Then, without a word, she closed her eyes again, and Evan finally let sleep take him outside. The wind carried faint sounds. At first, he thought it was the storm again. But as the night deepened, the noise became clear. Long, distant howls. They were not like Rinka's voice. These were deeper, rougher, and coming closer. Evan's last thought before sleep fully claimed him was a question that tightened his chest. If she was here, what else was out there looking for her? Evan woke to a strange warmth spreading across his chest. The cabin was dim. Only faint morning light filtering through the cracks in the wall. The fire had burned low, but he wasn't cold. He blinked. Still half asleep, then noticed the faint glow coming from his bare skin. A soft, golden mark, shaped like curling lines and claw-like strokes. Glimmered on his chest. It was warm to the touch, as if alive. His breath caught in his throat. Rinka was sitting near the fire, her back straight, her fur glistening slightly from melted snow. She wasn't looking at him, but he could see her. Ears twitch as if she knew he had woken. What? What is this? Evan asked, pulling the blanket aside to point at the mark. Her golden eyes flicked toward him, and for a moment she hesitated. Then she spoke, her voice low but clear. You are marked. Evan frowned, confused. Marked? For what? Her gaze held his for a long moment. For me, she said. For life? He sat up quickly, his heart thudding. What do you mean? For life? He asked, his voice rising. Rinka's expression didn't change. In my kind, a mate mark is made by instinct and choice. It bonds two together. It tells all others they are claimed, protected, untouchable to rivals. Evan stared at her, the words barely making sense. I didn't agree to anything like that, he said sharply. Rinka's ears tilted back slightly, but her voice stayed calm. Your agreement was not needed. It happened when survival demanded it. My body chose. Evan shook his head, trying to process it. So what? Now I'm yours? He asked, his voice caught between disbelief and nervous laughter. Rinka's gaze hardened slightly. Yes, and I am yours, but you do not yet understand what that means. Before he could respond, a sound outside caught his attention. Soft at first, then sharper, crunching snow, heavy steps. Rinka's head turned toward the door, our fur bristling along her shoulders. They found us, she whispered. Evan's chest tightened. Who? He asked. She stood, moving quickly to gather her gear. Her movements smooth despite her injured arm. Hunters, males of my pack. They will smell my mark on you, she said, and they will want to challenge. Evan didn't like the way her voice dropped on that last word. He glanced through a small gap in the wall and saw faint shapes moving through the snow. Large, wolf-like, armed with long spears tipped in dark metal. They're armed, he said, his voice low. Rinka nodded. And they will not stop. She threw him a fur-lined cloak and motioned toward the back of the cabin. There's a way through the rocks behind. We must move fast. Evan pulled the cloak around himself. Still trying to wrap his mind around everything, his chest tingled where the mark glowed faintly, and he could feel a strange pull in his gut. It wasn't fear exactly, but something deeper, like an awareness of Rinka's presence. They slipped out into the biting cold, the snow crunching under their boots. The sky was a pale silver, clouds hanging heavy and low. Rinka moved quickly, her steps almost silent despite her size. Evan followed, his breath puffing in the frigid air. Behind them, faint howls rose, followed by the sound of running feet. They're close, Evan said. Yes, she replied, too close. They ducked behind a ridge of ice-coated rocks, crouching low. Rinka's ears twitched, her head turning slightly. They are splitting up, she murmured, to two cut us off. One to follow our trail. Evan felt his pulse quicken. Then what's the plan? He asked. Rinka's eyes met his, and for a moment there was a spark there. You trust me, human? She asked. He hesitated, then nodded. Good. Then when I move, follow exactly, she said. Her voice sharper now, in a sudden burst. She dashed forward, weaving through snowdrifts. Leading him into a narrow passage between jagged ice walls, the sound of the hunters grew louder behind them. But Rinka didn't slow. Evan pushed himself to keep up, his legs burning from the cold and the pace. They emerged into a small, frozen clearing. Surrounded by tall ice pillars, Rinka stopped, scanning the edges. "They will come through here," she said, "and when they do, we will not be here." She pointed to a crack in the ice wall, barely wide enough for a person. Evan glanced at it. "You're sure?" he asked. She didn't answer, only moved toward it. He followed, the cold walls brushing against his shoulders as they slipped through the gap. On the other side was a small hollow, shielded from the wind. They crouched low, listening moments. Later, heavy footsteps entered the clearing they had left, followed by deep growls and short, sharp barks. Evan could hear their frustration as they realized the trail was gone. Kay leaned closer to him, her breath warm against his ear. "They will keep searching, but we have time to move. Come." Her hand brushed against his arm as she pulled him toward another path. The mark on his chest seemed to pulse at her touch as they moved deeper into the frozen wilderness. Evan glanced at her. She walked with a strange mix of strength and grace, her fur catching the pale light. Part of him still didn't understand how one night in the same bed had changed everything. But another part of him, a quiet, growing part, knew this was only the beginning. Far behind them, the hunters let out another long howl. It echoed through the ice, a promise that they would not stop until they found them. The cold bit at Evan's face as they moved, the wind carrying the distant echoes of howls. Snow crunched under his boots, each step sinking deep, making his legs ache. Rinka moved ahead with the ease of someone born to this land, her long strides, leaving a trail he could follow. Every so often she would pause, ears twitching, nose lifting slightly, as if tasting the air. "They are following still," she murmured, not looking back. Evan's chest tightened. "They can track us through this?" he asked. Her golden eyes met his briefly. "Through anything," she said. "The mark makes you easy for them to find." Evan's hand went instinctively to the warm glow on his chest. Hidden beneath layers of fabric, it still pulsed faintly. A strange reminder that he was now tied to her in a way he didn't fully understand. "Can't we cover it? Hide it somehow?" he asked. Rinka shook her head. "No, it is not on the skin alone. It is in the scent, in the spirit. They will smell it from far." He swallowed, his breath clouding in the air. "That's comforting," he muttered. Though there was no humor in his voice, they crossed a frozen river, the ice creaking under their weight. Evan's heart jumped at every sound, worried the ice might crack, but Rinka moved with confidence, guiding him toward a low ridge. Beyond it, the landscape shifted, tall ice cliffs, jagged peaks, and strange glowing plants pushing through the snow. Their pale blue light cast eerie shadows across the ground. "Stay close," Rinka warned. "These plants draw small hunters, and small hunters mean bigger ones nearby." Evan nodded, his knife ready in his hand. Though it felt pitiful compared to her claws as they weaved between the glowing plants, a sudden rustle made him freeze from the shadows. A frost beast lunged, a creature with 6 legs, a long neck, and rows of jagged teeth. It slammed into Evan, knocking him into the snow before he could react. Rinka was there, her claws flashing. She tore into the creature's side with a fierce snarl, hot blood steaming in the cold air. The beast thrashed, then collapsed in the snow, its glowing eyes fading. Evan pushed himself up, his heart pounding. "You saved me," he said, his voice uneven. She glanced at him, her breathing heavy. "You are marked. You are mine to protect," she said simply, as if it was obvious. He didn't reply, but the words stuck in his mind, heavy and strange. They found a small hollow under a fallen ice slab and decided to rest for a moment. Evan sank against the wall, his legs aching. Rinka knelt beside him, checking her wounded arm, the fur matted with dried blood that needs to be cleaned. He said. She tilted her head. Surprised at his concern, "You speak as if you care," she said softly. He met her gaze. "Maybe I do," he admitted. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the wind whistling through the ice. Finally, she said, "I did not mean to mark you human, but when I lay beside you, my body chose, my spirit chose. It is instinct older than our language." Evan frowned. "And now I'm stuck with it," he said. Her ears lowered slightly. "You can see it that way. Or you can see it as survival without the bond. You would already be dead before he could answer. A deep, rumbling howl rolled across the land. Rinka's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "They are closer than I thought," she said. Evan's stomach twisted. "They'll catch us if we stay here," she nodded, already standing. "Then we move, and we do not stop until night." They pushed on, moving through a narrow pass. Between towering cliffs, the air here was still, the snow deeper, muffling their footsteps, but Evan could feel it. They were being watched. More than once, he caught movement in the corner of his eye, shapes slipping between the shadows. "Rinka?" He started. "I know," she said, her voice tight. "They are hurting us." Sure enough, the pass widened into a flat expanse of snow, and across it stood 3 wolf-like figures, tall and armed. They didn't rush forward, but their eyes locked on Evan with burning intensity. Rinka stepped in front of him, her claws unsheathing, her body low and ready. One of the hunters snarled something in their own language, the words sharp and cold. Rinka replied, her voice like ice. Evan didn't understand the words, but he could feel the tension. This was no friendly meeting. The lead hunter took a step forward, pointing at Evan. Rinka's tail lashed, her voice rising. Suddenly, the hunter lunged, and Rinka met him head-on, the two colliding in a spray of snow. Evan stumbled back, gripping his knife, unsure if he should join the fight or run. The other 2 hunters moved to circle him, their eyes fixed on the glowing mark beneath his clothes. "Run, Evan." Rinka's voice cut through the chaos. He hesitated only a moment before turning and sprinting toward the far side of the field. Snow flew up around him, his breath coming in sharp bursts. Behind him, the sounds of snarls and claws on ice echoed. He didn't look back, but he could feel it. They weren't going to stop until one of them was dead. Evan's lungs burned as he ran, the cold air cutting like knives with every breath. Snow crunched under his boots, the sound too loud in his ears. Behind him, the clash of claws and growls thundered through the frozen air. He glanced back, just in time to see Rinka slam her opponent into the snow, her claws flashing, but another shadow was moving fast toward him. It was larger than the others, broader across the shoulders, his fur darker, his movements full of power and confidence. The massive wolf alien closed the distance in seconds, blocking Evan's path with a wall of muscle and fur. Evan skidded to a stop, gripping his small knife, though it felt almost useless. The alien's golden eyes locked onto him, but there was no curiosity there, only raw, cold anger. When he spoke, his voice was deep, each word dripping with disdain. "You carry her mark, human," he growled. "But you are not worthy." Evan's grip tightened on the knife, "and you are." He shot back, though his voice wavered. The alien's lips curled into something between a snarl and a smirk. "I am Keller, chosen of her pack. The mate she should have taken," he said. He took a step closer, towering over Evan. "She was mine until you." Before Evan could answer, Rinka appeared at his side, her fur bristling. Blood streaked across her shoulder from the earlier fight. "Keller," she said, her voice sharp as the wind. "Leave him." Keller's eyes narrowed. "You defend him. This fragile outsider, you think he can protect you? Lead you? Rinka's tail lashed, her stance low and aggressive. I do not need a leader, she said. And I do not belong to you. Keller's gaze slid to Evan again, then let him. Prove he deserves what he has stolen, he said, his deep voice almost a growl. Rinka shook her head sharply. No, this is not his fight. But Keller ignored her, stepping forward and pointing one claw at Evan. Trial by challenge. Now, Evan's pulse hammered in his ears. Look, I'm not here to, he started, but Keller lunged, forcing him back. The knife in Evan's hand felt pitiful against Keller's speed and strength. Keller swiped, and Evan barely dodged, the claws slicing through the edge of his cloak. Rinka moved between them in an instant, snarling at Keller. If you want to fight, you fight me, she growled. Keller grinned, showing sharp teeth. With pleasure, he said. And then he was on her. They clashed in the snow, their bodies moving in a blur of fur and claws. Evan backed up, keeping out of their way, but his chest twisted as he watched. Keller was strong. Each blow pushing Rinka back, she fought fiercely. But her earlier wound slowed her movements. A heavy strike to her side sent her tumbling into the snow, and Keller moved in for the finishing blow. Without thinking, Evan charged forward, ramming into Keller's side. It was like hitting a wall, but it knocked Keller just enough off balance for Rinka to roll away. Keller turned on Evan, his eyes blazing. You dare touch me, he roared, swiping at him. Evan ducked, the claws missing his head by inches. I dare when you're trying to kill her, Evan shot back, though his heart felt like it would burst. Rinka was back on her feet, her breath coming hard. Go, she ordered Evan. Get away from here. No, Evan said firmly. I'm not leaving you with him. Keller snarled and lunged again, this time catching Evan by the arm. His grip crushing, pain shot up Evan's arm. But before Keller could do more, Rinka slammed into him with all her weight, knocking him to the ground. The two tumbled in the snow, kicking up white clouds. Keller regained his footing and bared his teeth. This isn't over, he spat, his voice full of fury. He gave a sharp whistle, and the other hunters began to pull back, melting into the icy wilderness. But Keller's eyes stayed locked on Evan. I will take back what is mine, he said. And when I do, you will die slowly. Then he turned and vanished into the snow, his heavy footsteps fading. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind. Evan stood there, breathing hard, still gripping his knife. Rinka's shoulders sagged slightly, her voice low. He will not stop now, she said. Evan looked at her, the mark on his chest burning faintly under his clothes. Then we stay ahead of him, he said. She met his eyes, something unspoken passing between them. Yes, she agreed, but first we need shelter. They moved on, slower now, following the curve of the frozen cliffs. After some time, they found it, a hidden cave behind a curtain of icicles. Inside, the air was warmer, steam rising from a small pool of hot water fed by underground springs. Evan sank down near the pool, exhaustion washing over him. Rinka sat nearby, her golden eyes watching the entrance for the first time since meeting her. Evan felt a fragile moment of peace, but he knew it wouldn't last. Keller's promise hung in the air like the cold. The cave was dim, lit only by the faint blue glow from the icicles outside and the soft steam rising from the hot spring. Evan sat near the water, his hands hovering over the warmth, letting it thaw the stiffness in his fingers. His breath still came in slow, heavy pulls, his body worn from running and fighting. Rinka crouched near the entrance, her eyes scanning the white world beyond, ears twitching at every distant sound. She stayed that way for a long time, silent, until she finally stepped inside and let the curtain of icicles fall back into place. He will not find us tonight, she said quietly, her voice low but certain. Evan nodded, though his chest still felt tight from Keller's words. Who is he really? Evan asked, Rinka's golden eyes locked on his. He is the son of my pack's former leader, meant to take my hand and my loyalty. But I refused, and for that, I became a prize to be hunted, she said. She lowered herself to sit across from him, the steam from the pool curling between them like ghostly threads. Evan shifted, unsure if he wanted to ask the next question, and this mark you gave me. Did you know it would make him hunt me too? Rinka's ears lowered slightly, her gaze dropping for a moment. I knew it would make you part of my claim. Yes, but when I lay beside you that night, I did not do it with thought. My body acted. Before my mind, it is instinct for my kind to protect a chosen one from the cold, and the bond is the strongest way to do that. Evan leaned back against the wall, the stone cold against his shoulders. So now I'm stuck in the middle of your people's mating customs. He asked, Rinka's mouth curved in something between a frown and a faint smile. You say it as if it is a trap, human, but it is also a shield. No one can harm you without challenging me. And I will not lose. Her tone carried a quiet fierceness. That made Evan believe her, even as the danger outside loomed large. They fell silent for a while. The only sound, the gentle drip of water and the distant moan of wind beyond the cave. Evan's gaze drifted to her injured arm, the fur still matted. With dried blood, you should clean that before it gets worse, he said. Rinka tilted her head. And you will do it for me? She asked, her voice softer now. He hesitated, then nodded. She moved closer without hesitation, sitting beside him. The heat from her body warming his side. Evan dipped a strip of cloth into the hot spring and carefully began wiping away the blood. She didn't flinch, though her eyes followed his every movement. This is not something a human should do for one of my kind, she murmured. Evan glanced at her. Why not? Because it means trust, she said simply, and trust is rare, even among my people. Her gaze lingered on him a moment longer before turning back to the water. When he was done, she flexed her arms slowly. Testing it, you are careful. With your hands, she said, almost to herself. He chuckled faintly. I was a mechanic before this. Fixing things was my job. Her ears twitched, and now you fix me, she said, a hint of something unreadable in her tone. Evan felt a strange warmth at her words, different from the spring's heat. After a while they ate from the small stash of food Rinka had carried, dried strips of meat that were tough but filling. They sat close to the water, the steam curling around them. Rinka spoke again, her voice quieter. My pack is not as it once was. Once, we hunted together. We fought for the safety of our young, but Keller and others like him only care for power. They see bonds as tools, not as vows. She looked at him. When I marked you, I thought I had brought trouble to your life, but now I see you do not run from it. Evan met her gaze. Maybe I should have, he said with a half smile. But I'm still here, aren't I? Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Yes, you are, she said, almost like an admission. For a moment, the air between them felt charged, the sound of the wind outside fading from his awareness. Then, a faint sound broke the moment. The low, distant hum of engines. Rinka's ears went up instantly. Skimmers, she said sharply. Searching, Evan's heart skipped. For us. For me, she corrected. And by the mark, for you. They moved quickly. Gathering what little they had, Rinka pushed aside a narrow stone at the back of the cave, revealing a thin tunnel. This leads deeper into the cliffs. They will not find us if we move now. Evan glanced back at the warm pool. Reluctant to leave the safety, but he knew the safety was only an illusion. He followed her into the darkness, the cold stone closing in around them. Behind them, the sound of engines grew louder, and faint voices echoed across the snow. They didn't stop moving until the tunnel opened into a wider cavern, the air colder here but hidden from any skimmer above. Rinka turned to him, her eyes steady. This is no longer only about survival. Human Keller will keep coming until one of us ends this. Evan nodded slowly, feeling the truth of her words sink in. He didn't know how yet, but he knew he would stand with her when that time came. The cavern air was cold and heavy, the darkness stretching far beyond what Evan's eyes could see. The faint light from the tunnel behind them barely reached the stone floor, leaving shadows that seemed to shift with every step. Rinka moved ahead, her body low, ears turning with each small sound. Evan followed, his boots crunching lightly against loose gravel. He could feel it, the tension in the air, the sense that they were not alone. They had been moving for hours, deeper into the cliff's winding passages, when Rinka suddenly froze, her head tilted slightly, her nostrils flaring. "They're here," she whispered. Evan's stomach dropped. "You mean, yes?" she said. "Keller," before he could say more. A deep, mocking voice echoed through the cavern. "Rinka," Keller called, his tone slow and deliberate. "You can't hide forever." The sound of footsteps followed, heavy and confident. From the shadows ahead, Keller emerged, his massive frame filling the narrow space, his golden eyes gleaming. Behind him, 3 other wolf-like warriors stepped into view, each armed with long, curved blades. Evan instinctively stepped closer to Rinka. Keller's gaze shifted to him, and his lips curled in a cold smile. "There he is, the human thief," Keller said. "You think you can keep her from me? You think you are her equal?" Evan felt his chest tighten, but before he could answer, Rinka stepped forward, her voice sharp. "He is not my equal, Keller. He is my choice." The words echoed against the cavern walls, and Keller's smile vanished, replaced by a snarl. "This ends now," Keller growled, his claws flexing. He motioned for his warriors to stay back, his eyes fixed on Rinka. "You and me. No interruptions," he said. Rinka's tail lashed once behind her. "Agreed," she said, her voice steady. They circled each other slowly, claws glinting faintly in the dim light. Keller struck first, his massive arms sweeping toward her head. Rinka ducked low, spinning and slashing at his side, her claws leaving deep marks in his fur. He grunted, but didn't slow, driving forward with relentless power. Evan watched, his hands tightening around the knife at his belt. Knowing he couldn't step in without breaking their code, Keller was strong, each blow sending vibrations through the stone beneath their feet. Rinka moved quickly, dodging and striking, but she was tiring, her earlier wound slowing her just enough for Keller to press the advantage. With a powerful swipe, he knocked her to the ground, pinning her with one clawed hand. "You can fight, Rinka," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance, "but you can't win." Before he could finish her, Evan's voice cut through the air. "Let her go," he shouted, stepping forward. Keller's head snapped toward him, a dangerous gleam in his eyes. "You dare speak in my fight?" he snarled. In that moment of distraction, Rinka twisted sharply, kicking out with both legs, sending Keller stumbling back. She rose to her feet in an instant, breathing hard. "You talk too much," she said, and lunged. The two clashed again, claws raking, teeth bared, the sound of their battle echoing like thunder in the cavern. Evan's heart pounded with each strike, his mind screaming for her to win. Keller's strength began to falter as Rinka pressed forward, her strikes growing more precise. Finally, with a sudden burst of speed, she slammed into him, driving him back toward the edge of a narrow drop-off in the cavern floor. Keller's heels slipped on loose stone, his arms flailing for balance. Rinka stood over him, her claws ready. "This is your last chance." "Keller," she said, her voice like ice, "leave us and never return." Keller's lip curled, eyes blazing with hate. "I will never stop," he growled. Rinka's expression hardened. "Then you will not leave with one final strike." She sent him tumbling into the darkness below, his roar fading into silence. The cavern was still for a long moment. The only sound there heavy breathing. The other warriors shifted uneasily, then, without a word, turned and slipped away into the shadows. Evan stepped forward, his chest still tight from the tension. You did it, he said, his voice soft. Rinka turned to him, her golden eyes steady. We did it, she corrected. He would have ended me if not for your distraction. They stood there in the quiet, the danger finally seeming to fade. But Evan knew this wasn't just the end of a fight. Something had shifted, not just in their survival, but between them. The mark on his chest pulsed warmly. As if acknowledging the moment, Rinka glanced toward the tunnel ahead. We should leave before others come, she said. Evan nodded, but deep down he knew this fight had sealed something permanent. The air in the cavern felt different now, lighter somehow. Though the cold still pressed against their skin, Keller's roar was gone, swallowed by the deep dark below, and the echo of battle slowly faded. Evan stood close to Rinka, his heart still pounding from the fight, the mark on his chest warm like a living ember. For the first time since the night they met, there was no immediate threat pressing on them. They were free to move without the shadow of Keller looming. Rinka's eyes lingered on the tunnel ahead, her body tense as if expecting another ambush. But when no sound came, she finally let her shoulders relax. We will not see him again, she said quietly, her voice carrying certainty. Evan studied her face. The strong lines, the faint traces of exhaustion, the golden eyes that seemed brighter now. You're sure? He asked. Yes, she replied. Keller's pride would never allow him to return after such defeat. They began walking toward the tunnel, the faint light ahead promising the open world beyond. Each step felt strange to Evan, lighter than before, but also heavier with unspoken thoughts. He kept glancing at Rinka, wondering if she felt the same shift. Her movements were slower now, not from injury, but as if she too was thinking about something important. When they finally emerged from the cave, the pale light of the frozen plain stretched before them. Snow swirled gently in the wind, and far in the distance, the jagged peaks glowed faintly under the sun's low arc. Evan took a deep breath of the cold air, feeling it fill his lungs. Rinka stood beside him, her gaze scanning the horizon. We can head toward the human beacon now, he said, pointing toward a faint, blinking light far away. Rinka didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer, close enough that her warmth reached him through the wind, her golden eyes locked on his. When you leave this world, you could go without me, she said, her voice steady but quieter than usual. The words hit him unexpectedly. Without you? He asked. Yes, she said. Your life will be easier among your own kind. No mark, no hunt, no danger. I can stay here. Evan shook his head. That's not what I want, he said, his voice firm. Her ears twitched slightly. You would? Choose to keep the mark, to carry it even among humans who will not understand? She asked. He stepped closer now, meeting her gaze without hesitation. I didn't choose it at first, he admitted, but I choose it now for a moment. Neither spoke, the wind filling the silence. Then Rinka reached out and touched his chest lightly, her claws gentle against the fabric. The mark seemed to respond to her touch, glowing faintly through the layers. It will never fade, she said softly, not even in death. Evan smiled faintly. Then I guess it's a part of me now. They began walking toward the beacon together, their footprints trailing behind them in the snow. Every so often, Rinka would glance at him, as if still weighing his words. When they reached a small ridge overlooking the frozen valley, they stopped to rest. From here, the beacon light was stronger, a steady signal in the white expanse. You could have left me that first night, Rinka said suddenly. You could have pushed me out of that cabin, Evan shrugged. "And you could have left me to freeze." He replied. Her lips curved slightly. "Perhaps we were both foolish," she said, though her tone was warm, as they moved again. The distant hum of engines reached them. Evan's heart leaped. The human rescue ship was near. A dark shape soon appeared against the pale sky. Growing larger as it descended toward the beacon site, the wind from its engines whipped the snow into spirals. Rinka stopped, her eyes fixed on the ship. "This is your way home," she said. Evan looked at her. "Our way home," he corrected. Her gaze lingered on the ship for a long time, then shifted back to him. "If I step on that vessel, may never walk these plains again," she said. Evan nodded slowly. "Maybe," he said, "but you won't." "Be alone." They stood there in the wind for a moment longer. And then, without another word, Rinka stepped forward with him. Together, they approached the ship, the mark on his chest warm and steady. As the hatch opened and the crew waved them inside, Evan glanced at her one last time. Her sharp eyes took in everything: the metal walls, the human faces, the unfamiliar smells. Then she stepped through, her shoulders squared. As if claiming this new world as her own, Evan followed. Knowing the journey ahead would not be easy. There would be questions, stares, maybe even fear from those who didn't understand. But as long as she walked beside him, none of that mattered. The mark wasn't just a sign of survival anymore. It was a promise, and in the hum of the ship's engines, hers. As the frozen world faded below, he knew he had no intention of ever breaking it.